Hello, my name is Juliana Maris, and at my sister's birthday party, surrounded by roses, red dresses, and ruthless silence, she called me ghetto trash and pushed me into a piranha-filled pool. And the craziest part, that wasn't even the worst thing she did to me. The applause didn't start with me. It didn't end with me either. I was already halfway invisible when the lights dimmed and the string quartet gave way to the roar of 100 champagne-fed hands. My sister, Isolde, stood at the center of it all, draped in a red satin gown like the ones you'd see in a perfume ad, flawless, unreal, and worshipped. Her voice poured into the microphone like honey over poison. She was thanking everyone. Cousins, board members, a neighbor who once watered our garden. But not me. She never looked my way, not even by accident. I don't think I blinked once the entire time she spoke. I just sat there, hands clasped in my lap, the condensation from my untouched glass soaking through my fingers. The waiter closest to me, young, probably new, offered a fleeting glance of sympathy. But he turned away quickly, like he knew better. This wasn't an oversight. This was the script. I adjusted my silver dress, smoothing down the side, seams that no longer lay flat after sitting too long. It was the one I'd purchased because the invitation had said silver elegance. That line had repeated in my head every day for the past 3 weeks. Silver elegance. The crowd looked like a sea of blood. Every other woman in our family wore crimson, deep, commanding, coordinated, matching gowns with square necklines, identical heels, even the same earrings in some cases. I looked like a misplaced ornament, shiny but wrong. A voice behind me, sharp and low, cut through the orchestral murmur. Poor thing. She didn't get the update, did she? The words weren't meant for me, but they landed anyway. My ears burned. My spine straightened. As kids, Isolde used to change the dress code last minute. Oh, I forgot to tell you. She'd say with a shrug when I showed up in stripes while everyone else wore polka dots. Back then, it was embarrassing. Tonight, it was strategic. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. I forced a breath and raised my chin. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Not again. Tonight, it feels like they planned something bigger. I moved toward the edge of the garden, trying to gather myself near the refreshment table. That's when I heard them. A pair of women I didn't recognize, possibly distant relatives or industry guests, angled their phones toward Isolde's backdrop, laughing softly. Isolde's family is perfect. One of them said, they're like royalty. Royalty. And I'm the court jester they never wanted. Isolde's gaze swept the crowd. She paused near my section, but never landed on me. I was in her periphery, something to be avoided without making a scene. A server with a tray of hors d'oeuvres stepped right in front of me. The flash of a camera went off 3 times. None of those flashes caught my face. I flinched anyway. The lights always did that to me. I shouldn't have come. And yet here I am. My palms were slick when I reached for a napkin, not from sweat, from the pressure of holding in every word I wanted to scream. I tried slipping past 2 guests standing by Isolde's photo wall, but they didn't move. I waited, silent, my tiny gift bag feeling childish in my hand, like something you'd bring to a child's birthday party when you didn't know what they liked. I caught a fragment of a conversation behind me. Who is she? A pause. Isolde's sister, the forgotten one. Heartbeat in my ears. pressure behind my eyes. Forgotten feels merciful. This is erasure. I didn't say a word. I didn't turn around. I just stood there, invisible, like some misplaced ghost haunting the wrong gathering. If I disappear right now, no one will notice but me. Later, when the speeches ended and the crowd began to scatter toward the bar, Isolde descended the stage like a queen dismounting her throne. I stood in her path, hoping for something. A glance, a nod, anything that said, "I know you came." "Happy birthday, Isolde," I offered softly. She didn't slow, didn't blink. Her eyes skimmed over me like I was a fingerprint she meant to wipe off a mirror. "Stay out of the photos," she said. That was it. My hands trembled, so I tucked them behind my clutch. My knuckles ached from how tight I held the strap. Not forgotten, not ignored, excluded, on purpose. The cameras clicked. 1, 2, 3. Everyone glowed in the pictures, except me. I stood just outside the frame, drenched in shadow. A breeze pushed against my shoulders. I hadn't realized how cold it had gotten, or maybe I had, and I was just now admitting it. My dress felt thinner, my shoes too tight, and for the first time tonight, I feel something inside me crack. The crack inside me didn't echo, it spread. I felt it stretch beneath my ribs as I stepped away from the flashes and the crowd's soft applause. The lantern lights flickered overhead, swaying in the cooling evening breeze. I didn't know if it was the wind or my nerves, but something in the air shifted, brushing against my skin like a warning. I moved toward the drinks table, trying to look composed even though my pulse jumped in uneven beats. The scent of lemon verbena drifted up from the candles scattered across the tables, mixing with a swirl of cologne from passing guests. It made my stomach twist. I wasn't drinking, but my heartbeat thrashed as if I'd swallowed something sharp. I kept telling myself to breathe, to stand tall, to pretend. But pretending is exhausting, and I'd already spent a lifetime doing it. That's where it all started. I reached for a glass, plain sparkling water, my anchor for the evening, when I felt a hand brush my arm. I turned, bracing myself, but it was only Melis gliding toward me like she owned the air around her. Her red dress hugged her perfectly, her smile wide, warm, practiced. "There you are," she said, arms already open. "I've been looking for you." Her embrace was tight, too tight, the kind of hug that pressed bones, not hearts. Still, my shoulders loosened for the first time all evening. I let myself lean in just enough to feel human again. "You look beautiful, Jules. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise," she whispered into my hair. For a split second, I believed her. I shouldn't have. Looking back now, I should have sensed the shift before it hit. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. A notification pinged across the room. Then a laugh, light and sharp. "Look at this," a younger cousin called out. "When charity cases dress up." The words were followed by another laugh, louder, meaner. I froze. Every muscle pulled tight. Melis pulled back from me, but the warmth of her hug lingered on my skin. The laughter rising from the corner bar hit me like cold water. "Is that her in the silver?" someone else asked. The phone screen glowed. A photo of me and Melis, still wrapped in that embrace, sat beneath the caption. It wasn't clever. It wasn't even creative. It was cruel and easy. My chest tightened. The smile I'd managed earlier fell apart inside me. I felt the heat rising in my neck, shame blooming the way bruises do, silent, fast, impossible to hide. I didn't speak. I didn't move. They didn't push me away. They pulled me in first, so I'd bleed more when they let go. That's where it all started. I walked away before anyone could look at me again. The air outside the garden felt heavier, almost damp. I gripped my glass like it was something alive, something capable of holding me upright. I didn't trust my voice. I didn't trust my thoughts. I kept moving, slipping past clusters of guests until I reached the rear garden where the lights dimmed and the noise softened. "Miss, excuse me," someone said gently. I turned and saw one of the hotel's staff. Young, clean-cut, the kind of person who'd apologize even if a building fell on him. He held an iPad to his chest like a shield. "I thought you should know," he murmured, glancing around. "I didn't mean to see it. The device syncs with all guest groups automatically. I didn't realize." He extended the screen toward me. The family group chat. My family group chat. Messages rolled upward, one after another, each cutting in its own small, intentional way. "Keep her away from the food table. Last time she embarrassed us. I swear, if she tries to toast tonight." Why did she even show up? A numbness spread beneath my skin like I'd stepped into freezing water. My throat locked. No tears came. Not anymore. I'd already learned how to dry those years ago. "I'm not the family member they forgot to embrace," I whispered, almost to myself. "I'm the one they enjoyed excluding." Every sentence in that chat was a scalpel, and they passed it around like wine. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I moved farther into the garden, the soft light blurring as my memories tugged me backward. Christmas night, age 17. I'd worked a late shift at a small grocery store. My hair smelled like oranges from sorting produce. I walked into the dining room, hoping they'd save me a plate. They hadn't. "She's just here for the leftovers," Isolde whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. No one corrected her, not even our mother. Back then, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. A silly comment, a fluke. Looking back now, that moment should have taught me everything. You forgive what you think is a fluke. But this was choreography. That's where it all started. The music swelled again inside the venue. I followed the sound, the heavy thump of bass guiding me back through the entry arch. Isolde stood near the bar, laughing with Darien Chen's representatives. Her hand brushed one man's arm, her smile perfect and unshakable. Her voice carried effortlessly, slicing through the hum of conversation. A photographer preparing a shot asked me to step aside. "Sorry, miss, you're in the frame." I stepped back without protest. He didn't thank me. He didn't look at me. They don't crop me out. They erase me before the photo's even taken. I watched the room, the way everyone leaned toward her, the way conversations shifted when she passed, the way no one asked where I'd been or why my night seemed stitched together with silences. I was the only one without a voice, without a place, without power, but I was also the only one watching. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. If they were counting on my silence, maybe it's time to disappoint them. The air changed as we moved indoors. The night outside was soft and forgiving, but inside the walls, everything sharpened. Crystal glinted, silverware aligned with military precision, and chandeliers threw gold light across faces too polished to be real. My heels clicked against the polished floor, echoing in ways that made me feel like every step was a judgment. Not from me, never from me, but from them, always them. They hadn't said a word yet, but the silence was already working overtime. That's where it all started. Near the dining room entrance, guests gathered around a massive framed photograph, 6 feet wide, thick gold trim, mounted beneath a spotlight like something sacred. And maybe it was to them. A family portrait taken 3 summers ago in Tuscany, matching linen outfits, wine glasses in hand, laughter frozen in time. I wasn't in it, not even as a blur in the background. My name wasn't etched into the elegant caption that listed every smiling face in the frame. And above it all, a plaque that read, Varnell Legacy, together in all things. A woman beside me whispered to her husband, "There's such a stunning family." Another chimed in, "All of them so accomplished." I stared at the picture, not at their faces, but at the space where I should have been. I wasn't just missing. I'd been carved out, like a smudge they couldn't scrub clean enough, so they removed the wall. Looking back now, I should have known this wasn't a mistake. It was rehearsal. Even the wall tells people I never existed. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. A hostess approached with a pleasant smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Juliana, let me show you to your seat." I followed her through the room as murmurs trailed behind us. She led me past the main table, where Isolde sat glowing under the chandelier, surrounded by executives, friends of friends, and people who knew how to laugh at the right volume. We kept walking, toward the back, past the dance floor, beyond the bar, until we reached a narrow corridor just outside the staff hallway, tucked beside the bathroom. My name card waited on the table, except it didn't say my name. It read, "Guest of Varnell family." I blinked, just once. My fingers itched to tear it in half, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the seating chart from the invitation they'd emailed me weeks ago. My name, full proud, not erased, was listed at table 2, just behind Isolde. I turned to the hostess. "I think there's been a mix-up." She fidgeted, smiled tighter. "The host asked for updates this morning. I just follow instructions." Of course she did. That's how it always worked. No one ever made decisions. They just followed instructions. As if cruelty, when delivered politely, wasn't cruelty at all. I nodded and sat down, alone, far from the spotlight, far from the conversations, far from the food. That's where it all started. I was supposed to be near the front. Someone rewrote the map, and I wasn't the only one watching. I stared at the empty chair beside me for a moment. Then I lifted my phone and took a photo of the printed layout now displayed at the check-in desk. I sent it to myself with one word: proof. They think I'll flinch. They think I'll cry in a corner again. But tonight, I'm the only one archiving the truth. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. A clink of silverware called for attention. Isolde stood, champagne flute in hand, her dress catching the candlelight like it had been sewn from fire itself. She lifted her glass and smiled. "To family," she began. "The ones who make us look good," a few laughs scattered across the room, "and the ones who remind us where we came from." That earned more chuckles. Eyes flicked toward me. I smiled too, just enough to be polite. But my smile didn't reach my eyes. It never does anymore. They all think that line was harmless, clever, even, but I knew what it was, a reminder, a performance, a warning in lace. If they want me silent, they'll have to fight for it. That's where it all started. I didn't come to fight, but I won't leave unarmed. The room felt tighter after that thought settled in my chest, like someone had drawn invisible strings around my ribs and pulled. I walked away from the dining area, letting the hum of voices fade behind me. The crack inside me hadn't healed or softened. It had only grown quieter, steadier, like something waiting for the right moment to become a fault line. I kept my pace even as eyes trailed me, not with concern, but with calculation. People weren't curious. They were measuring. And the realization stung in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I passed the dessert table, watching hands reach for pastries as if the night hadn't already shifted. Every movement around me felt charged, like someone had dimmed the room just enough to show the outlines of motives I hadn't seen before. My heels touched the floor with a muted rhythm, and for a second I felt like I was stepping through an old memory, one I had tried too long to forget. That's where it all started. At the end of the meal, Verena, my mother, rose from her seat. She didn't need to call for attention. The room instinctively quieted. She held a velvet box, the kind you only see in family ceremonies or estate hearings. My pulse thudded against my ribs. She didn't look at me as she opened it. She looked at Isolde. "This belonged to your grandmother," she said, her voice smooth as polished stone. "It goes to the woman who keeps the family whole." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. But inside, something folded in on itself. That ring had been spoken about for decades. I'd heard stories about it since childhood. Rare, antique, passed down through the women who represented the family's strength. And now, it slipped onto Isolde's finger with ease, like it had been waiting for her all along. The room applauded. A soft roar, a chorus of approval. I stayed still. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't force a smile. My body felt rooted, but not in pride, more like resignation, the kind you feel when a truth confirms itself after years of denial. Verena passed behind me, leaning close enough that her perfume brushed my cheek. "Don't make this about you," she murmured. I didn't turn. I didn't even breathe for a second. "I'm not making this about me. You all did that the moment you made me the shadow in every photo." I stayed seated, letting the applause fade while a quiet heaviness settled into my bones. Tonight wasn't about inheritance. It was about belonging, and I just lost both. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I walked into the hall for air, my chest feeling too tight to hold anything else. The edges of the room blurred slightly, not from tears, but from a pressure that sat behind my eyes. The hallway was dimmer, calmer, with the faint echo of laughter drifting from the main room. "Aunt Jules," a small voice called out. I turned. My niece stood there, barely 7, curls bouncing around her soft face. She held a tiny purse shaped like a butterfly, her eyes wide with unfiltered honesty. "Why did Mommy say you begged to come?" she asked. Her words hit harder than anything her mother had said all night. "Did you?" she asked again. "Is it true?" I knelt before answering, smoothing my dress as if that could steady my hands. Her innocence made the question heavier, not lighter. I cupped her face gently, letting my thumbs warm her cheeks. "No, sweetheart," I whispered. "I came because I loved them. I thought that would be enough. She nodded, not fully understanding, but accepting it anyway. I pressed a kiss to her forehead and stood quickly before my voice cracked. Children echo what their mothers whisper in closed kitchens. That's where it all started. As I walked back toward the dining room, a memory surfaced out of nowhere. Me at 14, hiding near the pantry door at my grandparents' house. I heard my grandmother's voice, firm, decisive, the kind that shaped destinies without lifting a finger. She's too much like her father's side. She'd said, that family's always been trouble. I had pushed that memory down for years, buried it beneath excuses. But tonight, it rose again, sharp and unforgiving. It wasn't a loose comment. It was a brick in a wall that had been built long before I knew I was on the wrong side of it. They didn't hate me for who I became. They dismissed me for who I never got to be. This wasn't accidental. This was legacy by elimination. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I returned to the table, calm, collected, the kind of quiet that unsettles more than shouting ever could. Isolde leaned toward me, her voice a soft blade. "Why are you still here?" she asked, as if she expected me to crumble on command. I met her gaze and let a slow smile form, small, steady, and unshaken. "I'm just collecting memories." I said, "Some of us weren't allowed to have any growing up." Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes flickered, quick, subtle, almost hidden. She didn't flinch, but something behind her eyes did. Something shifted in her eyes, and for the first time all night, I felt the balance tilt, even if only by an inch. I walked away before she could recover whatever mask she meant to wear next. My pulse steadied as I stepped toward the open doors leading outside. The night air met me like a cold cloth to the forehead, and I realized I needed the space, not to escape the evening, but to reclaim something inside me that had been stepped on for far too long. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. That's where it all started. I followed the glow of lanterns strung across the patio, their light flickering against the manicured hedges. The music softened behind me, replaced by the distant clink of ice in glasses and the low hum of conversations trying too hard to sound effortless. I didn't want to be part of any of it. Not the laughter, not the masks, not the staged affection. I just needed a breath that belonged to me. My feet carried me farther from the dance floor than I meant to go, past the polished stone steps, past the trimmed roses, past everything that sparkled for show. I ended up near the back of the estate, a place that smelled more like herbs and soil than perfume. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was survival. Either way, it led me somewhere I didn't expect. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. A door stood slightly ajar, painted white, plain, unimportant. I pushed it open without thinking. The kitchen, the hum of industrial refrigerators filled the air. The clang of pans echoed like punctuation. Steam curled from a pot on the stove. Workers moved with practiced urgency, invisible to the guests who would devour their work without a second thought. A young chef noticed me standing there, arms folded around myself for warmth. His brow lifted, but he didn't look offended, just surprised. "You're not supposed to be back here," he said softly, handing me his coat without hesitation. I slipped it on, the warmth settling across my shoulders like something I hadn't realized I needed. "Neither are you," I murmured, offering him a small smile. "But we're both surviving in someone else's story tonight." He chuckled, gentle, unassuming. Yeah, something like that. I nodded, letting the moment ground me. The back door always shows you who's working, who's watching, and who's pretending. That's where it all started. With a steadier breath, I stepped back outside. The coat warmed my spine, though the air still carried the chill of everything unspoken. The garden had changed again, livelier, louder, filled with people who needed the night to keep validating them. Glasses clinked, laughter rose too sharply, and at the center of it, the pool glowed with a soft blue light, like a stage waiting for its next act. I was halfway across the patio when I heard her voice, sharp, precise, carrying farther than she thought it would. Don't ruin the photos again. Ghetto trash. The words weren't said privately. They weren't whispered. They were projected loud enough to bounce off the speakers and catch the microphone in the DJ's booth. Everything froze. A glass clattered somewhere near the bar. Someone sucked in a breath. Two women near the fountain exchanged a quick glance, one of shock, one of confusion. Some guests laughed awkwardly. Others stared straight ahead, too afraid to react. My eyes met hers, calm, unflinching, steady, the way still water holds its shape even when someone tries to disturb it. I didn't let my face move, not an inch. She said it like she always did, but this time someone else heard it too. That's where it all started. I didn't defend myself. I didn't lash back. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, not to record her, but to watch the faces of the people around us shift from amusement to discomfort. Their reactions were the real truth. They told me everything I needed to know. A family friend approached me, someone who'd known us since childhood. His eyes darted between me and Isolde. I didn't know she talked to you like that, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. She didn't say it for me. I replied. She said it for the crowd. And now the crowd's about to show her who was actually listening. He swallowed, unsure. Do you want help? No, I said, offering a tired smile. I just want them to watch her burn her own house down. He nodded, stepping aside. When you wait long enough, the fire starts on its own. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I walked toward the pool. The water rippled like silk under the hidden lights, the surface too calm for what lived beneath it. Beautiful things often hide sharpness. I understood that better than anyone. I stood at the edge, letting the reflection of lanterns dance across my shoes. People drifted around me, but no one got too close. It was the closest thing to peace I'd had all night. I felt her presence before I saw her. Isolde moved past me, her gown trailing behind her like a red comet. Her eyes avoided mine. I leaned in just enough for her to hear. That microphone works both ways. I didn't say it to hurt her. I said it as truth, as warning. She kept walking, shoulders tensing, only slightly. But slight is enough to tell you fear has entered the room. And warnings whispered are often the ones you hear long after the party ends. Her shoulders stiffened as she walked away, but I stayed by the pool a moment longer, letting the night settle around me. The lanterns swayed above the water, scattering light that shimmered like glass shards on the surface. People drifted back outside, carrying their drinks and their whispers, but none of them came near me. Maybe they sensed something cracking in the air. Maybe they'd heard what she said. Or maybe they were just waiting for the next performance. Either way, I stood still, breathing slow, steady breaths, while the party spun like a carousel around me. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I felt her before I saw her. Isolde's perfume always arrived 5 seconds before she did. Sharp, floral, the kind of scent that made space for itself even when no one asked it to. She approached with a smile polished enough to cut marble, her gown brushing the ground like a red tide. When she stopped in front of me, her voice was honeyed for the people listening over her shoulder. "You've really become something, haven't you?" she said, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. The tone wasn't a compliment. It was a statement layered with threat, sugar-coated for the audience. I held her gaze and waited. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. That's where it all started. Then her expression shifted, the sweetness dropping just enough for the real woman underneath to appear. Her hand shot forward, quick as a snake. She grabbed the necklace at my collarbone, the silver chain my father gave me on my 17th birthday, and yanked. "This was meant for me," she said, voice low, sharp. Mom just didn't say it loud enough. The chain snapped. It didn't fall gracefully. It jerked against my skin, tearing a small scratch along my collarbone before slipping into her hand. The cold air hit the bare spot on my chest like a slap. My breath held itself still inside me. I touched the empty space where it had rested, the warmth of it still fading from my skin. My face didn't move, not even an inch. But inside, something cracked again, only this time it didn't break apart. It crystallized. She broke the last thing I had from him. That's when I knew she didn't want to silence me. She wanted to erase me. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I stepped back, turning without a word. I didn't trust my voice, not because I was afraid of crying, but because I was afraid of revealing too much clarity. She wasn't worth that. Behind me, her voice rose, louder, theatrical, playing to the crowd that gathered like moths around a flame. "Where are you going?" she called. "Can't swim with the real ladies?" Laughter followed, a ripple of it, a rehearsed reaction from people who wouldn't dare challenge her. But laughter like that always cracks around the edges. It sounded strained tonight, thin, uneasy. I kept walking, but she wasn't finished. Footsteps approached fast. A sudden pressure slammed into my shoulder. Before I could turn, the world tilted. Then water. Cold, violent, blinding. The surface shattered around me in a burst of blue light and broken reflections. The pool swallowed me whole, dress billowing like silk wings, heels slipping from my feet. The water pressed against my ears, muffling everything except my own heartbeat thrashing inside my chest. For a moment, I hung beneath the surface, floating, suspended between shock and clarity. The water was cold, but not as cold as their eyes. That's where it all started. I kicked hard, breaking the surface with a gasp that sliced the silence open. The music had stopped. People stood frozen along the edge of the pool, phones raised, mouths parted, eyes wide. A few whispered. One woman covered her mouth with her hand. Did Isolde actually push her? Someone said. No one moved to help me, not even the people who claimed they loved me. My hands found the pool ledge, fingers gripping the wet tile as I pulled myself up using nothing but my own strength. Water streamed down my dress, dripping onto the stone like punctuation marks. A waiter hurried forward with a towel, eyes full of pity. I raised a hand before he could offer it. "No," I said quietly. The word came out steady, controlled. I'm fine. I wasn't fine. But fine wasn't the point. Fine was a prison. Tonight, I was stepping out of it. I walked toward the microphone stand near the DJ booth, my wet shoes squelching against the ground. People parted without being asked, their eyes darting between me and Isolde, as if waiting for a verdict. I didn't pick up the microphone to shout, or accuse, or cry. I picked it up because the truth needed a place to breathe. This isn't about revenge, I said, my voice low but carrying. This is about what really happens behind the pictures, behind the dresses, behind the smiles. My words echoed in the silence. Even the wind felt still. And if the truth has to be spoken soaking wet, so be it. I stepped back from the mic, placing it gently on the stand. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't swallowing tears. I wasn't begging to be believed. I was simply done pretending this didn't happen. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Isolde hurried forward, laughing a little too loudly, her face stretched tight. Don't be dramatic, Jules. You know how you are, she said, waving at the crowd as if trying to convince them this was harmless. But no one laughed with her this time. I didn't look at her. I looked at them, the guests, the witnesses, the mask wearers learning that masks don't work when the truth walks out of the water. No, I said softly, but now you do. I turned away from her. The crowd parted like water opening before a tide. Not because they feared me, but because they finally saw me. She threw me into the water thinking I'd sink. Instead, I walked out with every eye wide open. The night didn't quiet after I walked away from her. If anything, it sharpened. Every sound seemed to land differently, clearer, colder, more deliberate. I stepped back inside the villa, my dress still clinging to me, droplets trailing down my arms and falling to the floor. Each footprint I left behind shimmered under the lights, not as stains, but as proof. People didn't trail after me. They simply watched, as if trying to decide whether what they'd seen counted as reality. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. A soft buzz broke the stillness. Then another. Then a dozen more in quick succession. It was subtle at first, just a handful of guests glancing at their phones with furrowed brows. Then it swept through the room like a wave. Conversations slowed. Hands hesitated midair. Someone near the bar whispered, "Oh, my God, is this tonight?" And the wave crashed. A TikTok video glowed across a screen. Then another screen. Then another. There I was, falling backward into the pool. The lights reflecting off the water. The gasp that rippled through the guests. But what traveled fastest was the audio. Clear, sharp, irrefutable. "Don't ruin the photos again. Ghetto trash." The caption read, "This is what generational wealth looks like when you peel back the polish." 500,000 views in 22 minutes. Another 100,000 in the time it took someone to say, "Is that Isolde?" I felt the air tighten, like the villa itself had taken a breath and forgotten how to release it. I didn't look at the screens. I didn't need to. The shock on their faces was loud enough. They had ignored me in person, but online, they were all listening. That's where it all started. Near the center of the room, Darian Chen's assistant approached him with a phone. He leaned in, saw the video. His expression drained of anything warm. He didn't approach Isolde. He didn't ask her side. He simply set down his untouched champagne and walked out the side door. No farewell. No explanation. Just a departure that spoke louder than any confrontation. The ripple of tension slid directly to his soul. She stood rigid, laughter still perched on her mouth like a misplaced accessory. Then an associate tugged at her elbow, whispering frantically, "It's everywhere," he said. Darian left. Her glass tilted in her hand, nearly slipping. She blinked fast, as if her eyes could push the reality away. Her phone buzzed, the vibration harsh enough to tremble across the table. She picked it up and read the notification. Subject: contract termination. Morality clause breach. I watched her shoulders dip, not gracefully, but like a ledge cracking under weight. She scanned the message again, her breath catching, her fingers tightening around the phone. She looked around for me, but I wasn't standing where she expected. I wasn't standing near her at all. The MC tried to start a final toast, his voice unsteady. No one listened. Eyes stayed glued to screens or flicked toward Isolde with a mixture of shock and quiet satisfaction. She built a brand on perfection. Now she couldn't edit the reality she was drowning in. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Across the room, Verena, my mother, sat stiffly at a corner table. Her hands laced tightly in her lap. No te ars, no dinail. Just a kind of quiet that felt older than both of us. A guest leaned in, voice pitched with pity. "You must be so embarrassed." Verena didn't react. She didn't flinch. "No," she said clearly, "I'm disappointed. In all of us." The sentence hung in the air, like smoke. Heavy, lingering. True. A young waitress approached me with a dry blazer, her expression gentle. "Here," she whispered. "You look cold." I accepted it and slipped my arms inside, the fabric hugging my skin in a way that reminded me I wasn't abandoned. But I kept my silence. Words weren't necessary right now. This wasn't revenge. This was just the truth catching up. That's where it all started. People parted from me again, not dramatically, but instinctively. They weren't avoiding me. They were making space. Real space. The kind people give to someone they finally understand they underestimated. I passed Isolde on my way to the door. She was surrounded by relatives and PR specialists trying to salvage a night that had already collapsed in slow motion. Her eyes darted everywhere except at me. Maybe she was afraid of what she'd see. Maybe she already knew. I didn't stop. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My footsteps carried me across the polished floor, past the broken conversations, and toward the exit where the world felt cleaner. Outside, the night had quieted. The sky stretched wide and dark, holding a softness the party had drained out hours ago. The doors closed behind me with a muted thud, gentle, final. A young woman approached me, someone I didn't recognize. Maybe she was staff, maybe a guest's assistant. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Thank you for not letting them pretend." I held her gaze, offering a small nod. Her words rested in my chest like an anchor, not heavy but grounding. Sometimes justice doesn't shout. It just doesn't look away. The car idled quietly in the driveway, engine humming like a lullaby I hadn't been allowed to hear. I didn't open the door yet. I didn't reach for the keys. Instead, I sat there, windows fogged, hair still damp in places, clothes heavy with the night's aftermath. It felt strange to sit in silence without someone asking for approval or scanning my reflection. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed in the dark cabin, familiar and electric. I scrolled through folders I'd hidden months ago. A legal document titled Inheritance Update blinked back at me. 2 years earlier I'd signed it. My sister, yes, Isolde, stood next to me, smiling wide, telling me this was just administrative. We're taking care of everything, she'd said. You'll step into your own legacy. Legacy. Except the clause beneath, it was clear and cold. A total waiver of any claim to the family estate. I opened the document again and read through every line. Waiver release irrevocable. My pulse quickened with a strange sensation. Solid, inevitable, patient. She tried to strip me of legacy. Tonight, she lost her own. That's where it all started. I sent the PDF to myself with the timestamps and metadata intact. I didn't know whether to feel triumphant or just satisfied. The number of times I'd been told, this is between family, flashed behind my eyes. All that whispering in corridors, all that shifting of eyes away when I entered a room. The billboards, the family values promises, they didn't matter anymore. My screen buzzed again. A news alert. My breath caught. Varnell media deal terminated. Sources confirm morality clause breach. Isolde's face hovered above the headline, like she was still in control. But the words beneath it collapsed everything she'd built. A $1.2 billion contract, dead. Terminated. Publicly. There's no need to celebrate collapse. Truth doesn't gloat. It just stands taller than lies. That's where it all started. My dashboard clock read 3:17 a.m. I reached out and shut off the alert. I took a deep breath. Hold it, let it out slowly. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't shouting. I felt clear. She silenced me for years. But in the end, it was her voice that destroyed everything. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Back inside the villa, the soundscape was muted. Light footsteps, the scrape of chairs, a mutter of voices trying to salvage normal. Verena sat in the corner, shoulders folded inward like she'd been trying to contain the entire legacy and failing. Isolde was beside her, face paler, mouth slightly open as if she'd lost the script and didn't know her lines anymore. Mom, you need to fix this, Isolde said, voice sharp but soft, like glass cut by air. Verena didn't move for a long moment, her eyes fixed on her hands in her lap. There is no fix, she said finally. A silence claimed the room. It was one comment, one push. Isolde continued, voice rising. She's dramatic, always has been. Verena didn't respond. I watched them from the edge of the doorway, understanding too much. They made me small. And tonight, I made myself witness. No models, no illusions, just facts. This wasn't a scandal, Verena said, finally looking at Isolde. It was a pattern finally seen. That's where it all started. I walked back outside, the air crisp and clear like dawn's invitation. A billboard loomed ahead, Isolde's face smiling in perfect symmetry. The words below, elegance, legacy, influence, spray painted across it, canceled. I didn't smile. I didn't stop. I drove away slowly, windows down, letting the cool air wash over me like forgiveness. My phone buzzed. A message from Verena, I'm sorry. I deleted it without opening. Apologies from those who waited until walls collapsed. Don't heal, they echo. That's where it all started. They said I didn't belong. But now I don't need to. The road stretched quiet in front of me, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for explanation. By the time I reached Riverside, the sky had already begun its slow shift toward dawn. Soft pinks, hesitant blues. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, letting the engine settle and the silence wrap itself around me. I didn't realize it then, but the weight I carried all my life began to slip piece by piece right there in that parked car. That's where it all started. When I finally stepped inside, the house felt warmer than usual. Or maybe I felt warmer. I kicked off my shoes and let my feet breathe. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the candle I'd forgotten to blow out before leaving. It didn't scare me. It comforted me. Everything in this house had always been mine, quiet, unremarkable, but honest. The next morning, sunlight filtered through my front window, landing in golden squares along the hardwood floor. I watered my plants the way I always did, slow, patient strokes, letting the soil drink what it needed. My mind wandered, but not the way it used to. There was no panic looping back on itself, no constant replay of all the things I should have said. Sometimes freedom sounds like nothing at all. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. My phone buzzed on the counter. I almost ignored it, but old habits tugged at me. I picked it up. A voicemail from Verena. I pressed play. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, softer around the edges. You were right, she began, a long breath stretching between her words. I should have protected you. I didn't know how to face her. There was a pause, a small, trembling inhale. I'm sorry, Yulana. I listened once, only once. Then I deleted it. Her words weren't empty. They were just expired. There's a difference between regret and repair. I needed the latter. She only had the former. That's where it all started. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again, this time with a notification that didn't make my stomach tighten. A photographer, one I didn't know, had posted an editorial-style photo taken the night of the gala. It showed me walking down the villa stairs, soaked, alone. But my head was lifted, my steps steady. Light bounced off the water dripping from my dress, turning it into something almost regal. The caption read, "The one they pushed away walked out tallest." I stared at it for a long moment. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just let a long-held breath leave my body. A breath I didn't know I'd been carrying for years. They built their legacy in marble. I built mine in memory. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. A few days after that, a video clip surfaced on morning television. I didn't watch it live. I rarely watch TV anymore, but a co-worker sent it to me. Isolde on a national talk show. Perfect makeup. Perfect hair. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. The interviewer leaned forward. Before we continue, he said, we need to address what the entire country is talking about. He pressed a button. The screen behind them lit up. There I was falling backward into the glowing pool. There she was, her words clear, sharp, undeniable. Ghetto trash. When the clip ended, the camera panned back to Isolde. Her face had changed. Not crumpled, not apologetic, just hollow. She opened her mouth, trying to explain, but her voice cracked. Just once. The audience didn't boo. They didn't shout. They just looked. And silence, true pointed silence, is the harshest judgment of all. She asked for understanding, but all they saw was the woman she'd shown them. That's where it all started. 2 weeks after the gala, I walked through the halls of the school where I taught. Bright posters lined the walls, each one drawn by hands that hadn't yet learned cruelty. My students rushed toward me the moment they saw me, arms wrapping around my waist, small voices calling my name as if I hadn't missed a beat. A little girl handed me a card, the paper soft around the edges from being held too long. "You're strong and pretty," she said. "I want to be like you." I knelt to her level, smoothing a curl behind her ear. "You already are," I told her. When I reached my desk, I opened the drawer and placed her card inside. Beside it sat the silver necklace, fixed but unworn. The chain gleamed faintly, untouched, unclaimed by anything but my own choice. They took the spotlight. I kept the light. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. And some stories aren't about revenge or reclaiming what was lost. They're about choosing to never be invisible again. And maybe that's the real legacy, choosing not to fight for a seat at a table built to erase you, but building something of your own instead. So tell me, have you ever had to walk away to finally be seen? If stories like this speak to something deep inside you, subscribe now. There's more truth to come.